Okay, so The Wicker Man is often labelled as the Citizen Kane of horror.
The Citizen Kane of horror movies.
The Citizen Kane of horror movies.
The Citizen Kane of British horror.
However, the movie goes beyond the confines of one specific genre. Shot almost completely in daylight, it also brings in lots of elements from comedies and musicals. Even the things we tend to class as a horror don't really appear in the movie. Nothing scary even happens right up until the end, and there's no over-the-top shocks to jolt you in your seat. However, there's a feeling of unease throughout. Most of the horror's going on in the background, behind the camera. You don't know anything the first time watching it, it's only when you see that final scene that your mind starts to fill in the blanks. In the end, we learn we've been watching a cult and it recontextualizes everything that came before. All those smiling, sweet and slightly sickly faces, they all take on another meaning. Because of that, it's a film that's stuck with me for a long time, and I think it more than deserves its reputation. It's gone on to influence every cult film that followed, and you can see it in Midsommar, The Third Day and much more. So throughout this video, we'll be revisiting this classic and going back to The Wicker Man.
No, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah!
No, not that one. I wouldn't do that to you, or would I? Don't threaten me with a good time. So in the early 1970s, Christopher Lee was in a bit of a conundrum. Having played several horror icons, he was worried he'd been painted into a corner. Lee, for as good of an actor that he was always playing the parts of a monster. Whether that was in The Curse of Frankenstein or Dracula, he felt his career was at an impasse. Lee was desperate to break free from this image and act in more complex and challenging roles. Thus, he met with screenwriter Anthony Schaefer and the idea was born. Schaefer even said that horror was seen as one of those genres where Christopher Lee flounders around in fake teeth and chases after a damsel in distress. Thus, he wanted to do something more. Though horror had seen experiments before, this felt like the first true elevated horror. Tackling the themes of Christianity versus paganism, we'd see devout follower versus, well, devout followers. I feel the word Wicker Man also plays in the word Weaker Man, and it paints out a story in which Howie is horrifyingly bested by the pagans. Now if you cast your mind back to the 70s, then it adds an even more shocking element. It was estimated that 90% of the UK were Christian, and showing the murder of one in a final scene was a big deal, especially as he stays so devout throughout the movie. Sergeant Howie has his faith constantly tested, but he remains strong in his traditional values. In the end though, he still gets killed and sacrificed to the old gods of the island. The locals believe this will save their home from doom, and we don't even find out if it actually works. Throughout they basically had him going on their path and watching him wind his way to his death.
The little old beetle goes round and round, always the same way you see, until it ends up right up tight to the nail. Poor old thing.
The horror was beneath the surface and totally different to what you'd think with a Hammer horror. When crafting the idea, Schaefer came across the novel Ritual by David Pinner. Originally commissioned as a film treatment by Michael Winner, this would star John Hurt in the leading role. The film would follow a Christian policeman who was tasked with investigating a ritualistic murder. Pinner was currently playing the leading role in Agatha Christie's Mousetrap, in which he starred as Detective Sergeant Trotter. The police procedural tone then made its way across to the source material, with its sort of feeling like one of those 70s TV shows. Travelling to a rural village, the officer slowly unearths the inhabitants were in on it. The ending is completely different though. He basically gives in and gets tempted by their ways, joins them, and it's... Though the elements are there, I think if you read that book and expected to read The Wicker Man, you'd be sorely disappointed. In the end, this project never got off the ground either, and thus Winner stepped back from filming it. However, David Pinner then decided to flesh it out into a novel. Schaefer paid £15,000 for the rights, but couldn't quite get the novel to work as a screenplay. So instead, he adapted some of the elements. He began pulling in stuff like the paganism and became swept up in their practices and beliefs. You notice that a lot of religions were based around sacrifice, such as Jesus dying for our sins. However, he did know that pagans often sacrificed others for their beliefs, and these ideas nicely played off against each other. In learning more about the practice of human sacrifice, he came across Julius Caesar's commentaries on the Gaelic War. These described gigantic wickermen that were filled with people and then set ablaze. This image instantly burned itself into Schaefer's mind, excuse the pun, and thus the titular Wickerman was born in this moment. That became what the entire film was built around, and the entire movie was basically pushing a character towards this fate. Now, if you pick up the Ritual novel, you're not going to read The Wicker Man. There's lots of differences, but those bare bones aspects basically are what built this film. When it came to making it though, the studio were in a bit of a difficult position. Though they wanted to go ahead with the film, there was rumours of a union strike happening very soon. So rather than waiting until the spring, they shot in the winter and everyone was absolutely freezing on set. You look at that final scene, looks like a nightmare, but I don't think you'd be able to tell, and they even sucked ice cubes between scenes so their breath wouldn't show. Just throw me in the fire, mate. Now depending on what version you watch, you're going to get a slightly different cut. From the off, the creators butted heads with the studios who wanted a more upbeat movie. Like they even suggested some divine intervention at the end, which we'll talk more about when we get to it. As we see, the producers managed to win this battle, but they lost the war when it came to the other cuts. 20 minutes were removed from the movie, and yeah, having seen all cuts, it severely limits the impact. They're all available though in this brand new collection, which was released in 4K by Studio Canal. That contains the theatrical cut, the director's cut, and also the final cut. Now that is the final cut, but there's more footage in the director's cut, so when it comes to what I'm breaking down, that's the one I'll be covering. For decades though, most of the footage was lost and they were unable to restore it. Unfortunately, there's still tons of things missing and elements of the film that have been simply lost forever. Christopher Lee even claimed that some of the canisters were used to build the foundations of a motorway. Some of the negatives were also stored at Shepperton Studios, which were locked away and hidden for decades. The owners then bought the place and ordered the old materials to be destroyed. Unfortunately, the vault manager then put the negatives labelled "Do Not Destroy" in with the do not destroy ones. I made that bit up, yeah, but I basically took the negatives and put them on the destroy pile. However, in 2013, Studio Canal started a Facebook campaign searching for original footage. This led to a 92-minute 35mm print being located at the Harvard Film Archive. Though this wasn't the complete film, as things stand, it's about as complete of a cut as you can get. Even if you watch some of the cuts in the film on the disc, you'll also notice that the quality is pretty bad, but yeah, as for the final cut that they've just released, looks absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I highly recommend you buy this version if you want the complete experience, because the 4K restoration they've done is absolutely phenomenal. I will be discussing all the versions' differences throughout though, including the original opening. And that begins with a text card thanking Lord Summerisle. This was them basically doing the based on a true story thing to make you buy into the events. It's something that Blair Witch would weaponize heavily, and Texas Chainsaw did a similar thing 1 year later. Both of which we've broken down on the channel. However, this helped to give you a feeling that what you're seeing is something that could really happen. YouTuber Jenna Stober brought up in one of her videos on the film how one of the tales around the movie was that the creative team went to a village where they were doing lots of festivities. They got chased by some kids on a bike and were basically teased by the locals. They said you wouldn't want to walk in there on the wrong day, and this atmosphere just oozes throughout all the story. Now the director's cut has an opening that gives us a bit more about how his life as a cop. In the titular role is Edward Woodward, who plays him as an uptight virgin who follows the rules without question. Virgin's disrespectful, but how he believes in sex before marriage. We find out he's been engaged to a woman for 2 years, but has abstained from giving her his Wickerman. Because of this, his fellow officers make fun of him and see him as a bit of a square. And they even say that she'll spend more time on her knees in church than on her back in bed. On the flip side of this though, Howie's sort of a snob. He berates his fellow officers throughout the scenes and even tells one of them to get themselves a haircut. The intro also gives us our scene where he's in church, which is what ends up opening the final cut. Why does Edward Woodward have 4 D's in his name? Because if he didn't, it would be Iwa Woo Woo. Police then receive a letter from Summerisle saying a young girl's missing, and thus he heads out there. On the postcard we can see the symbol for Summerisle, which is a large smiling sun face that appears throughout the film.
Nuada, our most sacred god of the sun.
It's constantly there in the background and a reminder of the paganism that's laced throughout the village. Now it's here that we start the majority of the versions that you're going to see. Instantly you're hit with the bright colourful ocean view, and overlooking this is where we end the movie. There's lush fields of trees, and they actually had to shoot most of this in South Africa due to Scotland not having any like this. I never really noticed it until researching the film, but I'm guessing tree experts would have been very unnerved about how unnatural that it is. Tying into that feeling of feeling unnerved again, most of the film takes place in the day, and this was even more so in the theatrical cut. That misses out an entire night and has Howie go to the inn and then basically go through the events without the second night. Ryan Hollinger did a fantastic video on it where I think he summed it up perfectly and describe what we usually see in the genre. Horror movies tend to switch to night when something big's about to go down, and Ryan described this as being almost like a trigger warning. As an audience, as soon as it hits night, we basically ready ourselves for a big jump scare. Loud noises! The movie isn't filled with that at all though, and instead there's just a constant feeling of dread. Upon landing, the locals aren't really helpful, and he has to basically lambast them into sending a boat out to his plane.
I'm afraid it can't be done, sir. This is private property. You can't land here without written permission.
They chat amongst themselves and eventually send the boat out, but it's clear it's caused a ruckus in the village. Kids hang out their window and we see an evil eye on the boat, which is a very ominous omen. Now, this was kind of a happy accident as it actually belonged to a resident of Pluckton. They realised it would be perfect for the film and thus decided to use it for the movie. Thematically, it represents the hidden eyes that are constantly looking at Howie and also ties in the ideas of paganism. I'm sure you've seen David Blaine, but I should have drawn this on, but you know, David Blaine when he pops up his own evil eye, but this is actually something that existed throughout history. Evil eye makes it sound like that's the root of evil, so the name's a bit confusing, but it's actually supposed to ward off evil in a way that it's constantly watching it. Kind of like scarecrows, you know, they stand in the field, scare birds away, they're just constantly watching, that sort of thing. It's clear to them though that Howie is the evil, and they've placed this eye in order to watch him very closely. Now the location itself is Galloway in Scotland, which Britt Eklund called the bleakest place on earth. This caused a bit of a stink, and the producers had to apologise to the locals. Howie then shows him a photo of Rowan, and they all play dumb.
No, I've never seen her before.
I don't know the face either. You know her, Kenny?
She doesn't belong to this island.
Now, you might notice throughout the film that all of the people on the island are named after trees and shrubbery. Rowan is the first of these, and later we have the grave of Beach Buchanan.
Goliath Beach Buchanan.
With that being a beech tree, he's an ancestor of Ash Buchanan, who we also meet in the movie.
I have the honour to present to you Ash Buchanan.
There's also Ms. Rose and Britt Eklund's character's named Willow. Wicker wood is of course made from willows as well, and later on when Howie visits the graveyard, he notices the stones all have trees planted over them. Instead of photos of people per se, there's pictures of fruit from the trees on their graves. The people of the island believe that when you die, you go to the dirt and then are reborn in the trees and the fruit that grows from it.
I've tasted the famous apples, of course, but it's odd, isn't it? I mean, all that fruit.
We'll talk about how this came to be in just a bit, but it's clear the islanders have done something to provide so much fruit. They've been hit with famine though, and believe that in order to get this abundance once more, they have to kill, and thus the gods will bless them with more agriculture. This also ties into why the Lord became so powerful. His grandfather introduced a new strain of apples to the island which bore more and more fruit.
You see, his experiments had led him to believe that it was possible to induce here the successful growth of certain new strains of fruit that he had developed. So, with typical mid-Victorian zeal, he set to work.
Best way of accomplishing this, so it seemed to him, was to rouse the people from their apathy by giving them back their joyous old gods.
And that as a result of this worship, the barren island would burgeon and bring forth fruit in great abundance.
Thus he was planted as their leader and has brought them fame and fortune. However, upon losing this, they believe that they must now kill to get it back again, even though Howie tells them pretty plainly how stupid they are.
It is I who will live again, not your damned apples.
Now Rowan's photo is that of Jackie Cowper with her twin sister Jerry playing the girl when we meet her later. I'm guessing this was down to child acting laws. However, I do think it serves the movie. When watching her at the end, it just felt like there was something slightly different, and thus I think that's down to the fact that they're not actually the same person. Might be reading into that way too much, like I do a lot on this channel, but I think it could just be something that throws you off and gives us a sort of distorted version of what we've seen so far. Distorted is probably the wrong word, but even having something slightly off can throw you off as a viewer. We also learn that her mother's name is
May Morrison's.
May, of course, also plays into the idea of Mayday. Though we still celebrate in England, Mayday actually has pagan roots. This is why it appears so heavily throughout Midsummer, and it's basically a festival that celebrates the spring. Mayday represents the triumph over nature, which normally signals the end of winter. It also celebrates a renewal of life, and we see people dancing around the maypole in the film. Here it's used as a rejection of Christianity and its teaching, and it also rubs Howie the wrong way, and us as viewers, because it's a little bit noncy, mate. The kids are taught the phallic meaning of the maypole, and cults often have seedier things going on beneath the surface that I think this is kind of tapping into. There's that hidden horror that the children could be subjected to, and in the end, they also play a part in the murder. Although this film is pretty much the default outline of what every cult film is based around, it's actually got a lot of similarities to The Eye of the Devil. Released in 1966, both films feature feudal lords who rule over a rustic community. When the crops begin to perish, they decide to hold a human sacrifice in the form of a pagan ritual. Just like this film, that one also ends badly, and we close out both movies with both heroes failing to stop it. As Howie heads in, we then see lots of the villagers watching him, eagerly awaiting the arrival of their sacrifice. Howie then heads to Mae Morrison's Sweets, who's got lots of weird things in the window. There's a chocolate baby and even some chocolate skulls and ram heads as we go down. There's also human looking figures adorned with flowers, which in paganism is typically what one would be covered in before being buried. And yeah, having just rewatched Midsommar, obviously it recontextualizes a lot of this. Things look normal though, you know, they're celebrating Easter eggs and stuff, and there's also some chocolate rabbits.
Those are hares.
Ooh, sorry, hares. Throughout the movie, you know, I think there's a couple of moments where they touch upon the elements of paganism that Christianity borrowed, with this being one of the most obvious. These days, we'd see a chocolate bunny associated with Easter, but as Morrison says, this is something completely different. Now, this is some subtle foreshadowing, as how he later exhumes Rowan's grave and finds the body of a hare in it. Hares have been known to symbolise the transmuted soul, and here they act as a stand-in for the missing child. In Celtic lore, hares were thought to be able to shapeshift, and this was down to their elusive nature. Rowan is pushed to Howie as being part of the sacrifice, and the hare's body represents her expected role in the ritual. They've placed her body in the grave to take the place of the child, and it's some great foreshadowing in the shop. Especially as May says Rowan's not her daughter, and we have her standing in the back instead. Her daughter's been replaced and looks completely different, and she's drawing a hare to tie into that idea of shapeshifting.
Look, Mummy, I'm drawing a hare. Ah.
Upon questioning whether the girl knows Rowan, Myrtle says she runs free in the field all day. She says Rowan's a hare now, and it further leads Howie down this path. At night, we then cut to the Green Man Inn.
Even earlier.
In paganism, the Green Man's an ancient spirit who represents fertility and the untamed wild nature of, well, nature. The Green Man is a god that often requires sacrifice, and this is why he's been adapted into stories like The Green Knight, which often ends in the hero taking their own life. Arriving at the inn for a room, he then meets Britt Ekland, who you might know from The Man with the Golden Gun, which of course also features Christopher Lee, and there's a breakdown of it on the channel now. Now, as Howie enters, the locals are a bit weird, and strangely, they all burst into song about the landlord's daughter.
The landlord's daughter.
Bloody hell, mate, her dad's right there.
Although she's not the kind of girl to take home to your mother.
Bloody hell, even the dad's laughing. Then a punter dry humps her about the pub, and all the guys basically sing about how good she is in bed. Now, what the hell's going on? Well, as we see, Willow later dances naked in her room while singing as a way to tempt Howie into bed. She stands as an opposite to Howie's repressed sexuality and acts as the island's seductress. In paganism, there were several priestesses of sexual pleasure who in turn represented fertility. Willow's completely hedonistic along with the islanders, which is why her dad's not even bothered about people talking about shagging her. He's played by Lindsay Kemp, who is actually only 4 years older than Ekland in real life.
Damn, I look old.
But you play a fantastic 50-year-old. Now, Willow is part of this sacrificial ritual as well, and is the goddess of love in human form who's there to destroy his celibacy.
You are the goddess of love in human form, and I am merely your humble acolyte.
Howie holds firm though, but bloody hell, mate, I don't know if I could have done it. Fucking Britt Ekland, that, mate. Fucking Bond girl right there, mate. Now, if you've kept up to date with the film, then you've no doubt seen that Ekland has been pretty open about how much he disliked what happened to her. In case you don't know, Ekland was pregnant at the time and refused to shoot the scenes from the waist down. Without telling her, they then brought in a body double for the nude parts. According to IMDb trivia, Gary Carpenter said that this woman was the naked woman who we see weeping at the grave later. Ekland also said words to the effect of how she didn't think the woman's body was as good as hers, and she definitely didn't have a better arse. But she gets annoyed because everyone's like, oh, you were I love your arse in that or something, I don't know. Go watch an interview. What annoyed her were that these changes were made without her consent, and she also had her voice dubbed by jazz singer Annie Ross. She said that she tried a Scottish accent throughout the film, but obviously the producers didn't like it. This was the only time in her career when she was dubbed, and from what I can gather, they also didn't tell her about that. So Eklund has completely disowned the film and claims that she's never actually watched it. Either way, when looking about the pub, Howie sees the Harvest Festival photographs. One's missing, and though the landlord says it broke, the Parsons removed it because it showed a failed festival. Shout out to Jenna Stober as well for pointing out that though he says they removed it because it's broke, you can see there's still a broken photo hanging up there. Howie then complains about the beans coming out of a can, and there's also no apples as well.
No apples?
On an island famous for its fruit and vegetables.
So clearly the locals are struggling, and this failed harvest has left him getting peaches in a can for dessert. But fertility is in the air, and Howie goes outside to basically see an orgy on the lawn. Howie also spots that naked woman crying over a grave we mentioned before, with this likely being a lover that she lost. Now beyond the whole themes of religions clashing, this film is also about authority failing. Howie represents the establishment, and as a policeman, he keeps law and order, but the pagans see themselves as free spirits and not people who are bound by rules. Upon returning to the inn, Howie then goes to his room where we can hear the song Gently Johnny. It's a folksy song about sexual freedom, and outside we see as the Lord presents Ash Buchanan as a gift to Willow. The Lord sees her as Aphrodite, and he's giving her a lover as a gift in the same way a life will be given in a sacrifice. And he's a lucky lad, that Ash. So yeah, that we kind of get some clues about what tomorrow brings, and she says,
"The day of death and rebirth."
Yeah. Now this line makes way more sense in the theatrical cut. Because yeah, there's a whole day and he doesn't die the next day. Again, in the extended ones, there's another night on the island before Howie's killed on the third day. However, in the theatrical cut, you know, they just have the one night and basically have the sacrifice happen at the end of the second day. So you're missing a full day in that one, but the line makes sense. But yeah, that's why the creative team was so annoyed with that initial release, because you're losing a big part of the story. Lord Summerisle then looks over some snails, rattles off some poetry, and basically talks about how he could live with the animals. Now this is based on a poem by Walt Whitman, and it's paraphrasing a lot of his work. What it touches upon though is how animals aren't bound by religion and don't get on their knees to worship a higher power. They're not bound by devotion to their gods, and all over the earth these creatures have freedom from society norms. As Willow does the ash smash, the people below also look to a poster on the ceiling. This is the Sun Tarot card which belonged to the High Priestess. Painted by Diane Cilento, she plays Miss Rose in the movie. In another big James Bond connection, she was also married to Sean Connery, and I'm sure that Edward Woodward was also considered to play M at one point as well. Anyway, Howie basically tucks his head under the pillow, and we cut to the next day. This originally would be where the dancing scene with Willow played out, but yeah, because of the rough cut, we get that whole extra night, and I'll stop going on about it. Anyway, we see a symbol of the sexual encounter, and watches a rings placed on the maypole. Howie's then directed to the school, and we get an absolute banger in the background as the teacher sings a song about the reproductive beliefs of the islanders.
In the woods there grew a tree, and a fine, fine tree was he. And on that tree there was a limb, and on that limb there was a branch, and on that branch there was a nest, and in that nest there was an egg, and in that egg there was a bird, and from that bird a feather came, and of that feather was a bed. And on that bed there was a girl, and on that girl there was a man, and from that man there was a seed, and from that seed there was a boy, and from that boy there was a man, and for that man there was a grave, and from that grave there grew a tree.
What are you singing, Petey?
Just making it up as I went along, really.
That's just weak songwriting.
This basically explains how the islanders believe that in death, one is planted into the ground and then grows from the tree to receive life once again. In the background during this, we can also see the ruins of a church which have basically been left to rot and decay. However, the maypole stands strong and bright and represents this thriving community. We also get a shadow on the ground that appears to be a crucifixion post. However, their arms are lowered and the teacher springs forth, which to me stands as a defiance to Christianity. Inside, Howie then overhears a lesson about the phallic symbol of the maypole.
It is the image of the penis.
Alright, love, I was trying to keep it a bit classier, but yeah, the image of the penis it is. It's also in spring to play into the lengthening of the days and how they get longer, just like a boner. Howie the prude can't handle this though and talks about reporting the corruption of the young. He talks about the degeneracy on the island stemming from the classroom, and there's of course that constant back and forth in the real world about how classrooms indoctrinate kids. I think you'll always have arguments about sex education, but here it almost steps into the realms of grooming. Normally, sex education might be reserved for just this lesson, but everything on the island is built around sex. You can't really go anywhere without being reminded of it, and when there's so many kids, it makes things a lot more sinister. Howie then writes Rowan's name on the blackboard, and we can see lessons about the toad and hagstone. These are superstitious charms that are supposed to ward off evil. The stone protects people from nightmares, with the toadstone protecting people from the weird woman, or witch as we would commonly call her. Now the kids deny knowing Rowan, but Howie puts it all together because dun dun dun, they've got a missing desk there, mate. Upon opening it, Howie gets his first omen. He's the bug going around its own maypole and being pulled into the middle, unable to escape. Discovering Rowan's name in the register, he then asks the teacher if the girl's dead.
You would say so.
Oh, come on. She's either dead or she's not dead.
But death for these guys is simply a state of transformation, and she even mouths the word death like it's Voldemort.
We do not use the word.
Are you pulling my dick, bro?
It's so good, and you can see Howie thinking, what the fuck, as she explains what they teach in school. Now Diane got embroiled in one of the many affairs that were said to happen on set. She and Schaefer got close and ended up marrying in 1985. It was said that nothing happened while filming was going on, but obviously, you know, people have kind of theorized that something might have. What really caused issues though was the one between Ingrid Pitt and Petter Snell. Pitt played the town registrar and Snell was the film's producer. This got out and really annoyed Pitt's partner George Pinches, who unluckily just so happened to be the head of cinema bookings at the time. This is why the film struggled so hard to get distribution, as he didn't really want this movie to be a success. Now, although that's hearsay and rumour, did he do it on purpose? Was he jealous? Was he not? Did it really happen? Blah, 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 blah. Lots of rumours and stuff, but that's basically the shortest explanation I can give. Anyway, the teacher directs Howie to the graveyard, which has been pretty much all but abandoned. Discovering Beech's grave, this has a tree growing out of it and a line on the stone that talks about the ejaculation of serpents. Sex stuff. In the back, he finds a woman breastfeeding and holding an egg.
Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time? Yeah, he's got an egg!
Director Robin Hardy explained that the egg is a symbol of life and she's using it as a way to pray for another baby. All that she wants is another baby, that sort of thing. It's also possible that this is praying for the harvest, as we see Howie coming across a box of rotten apples. Fashioning a cross, this is a desperate attempt to plant his beliefs on the island. As we see, it doesn't go down well, and then he meets the creepiest gardener I've ever seen. This is Aubrey Morris, who plays someone creepy as fuck as well in The Clockwork Orange. Breakdown on the channel now. He's in charge of planting the trees on the graves, and we learn that he's placed one for Rowan. It's also like a bit of weird flesh. What is that, mate?
The poor wee lassie's navel string, of course. Where else should it be but hung on her own little tree?
Just the way he says that, like he's questioning where else should it be but hung on a tree, and it always kills me. And yeah, fantastic scene. It again ties into the notion of birth though, and how a relic of Rowan's life is now springing forth into her new one. She's not dead yet obviously, but you know what I mean. Returning to the sweet shop, we see as Morrison's daughter is made to hold a toad in her throat, which was said to cure a sore throat. Now it sounds mental, mate, but people used to believe it, and they'd chalk up a frog croaking as taking away your croak. Your croaky throat. I could use some on these videos. I don't know if you can hear it, don't know how bad it is, but I am struggling. The kids have been at nursery and they've brought home loads of shit as per usual. Howie then runs into roadblock after roadblock and is denied access everywhere. I love how the woman in the office also pulls out a tin of peaches, cause that's what they're having to resort to. Finally riding up to the Lord's home, he passes a bush that looks a bit, well you can see for yourself. Penis! It's also a Stonehenge-like structure with the class performing at it topless. This is like the maypole dance, but far more unhinged, and they're singing about a ritual to help grow a child. We can't really show it because I think YouTube would demonetize it. I also don't know how old these girls are, but it's just another creepy tune that embeds itself in your memory. Upon arriving at the manor, Howie then sees several pictures of apples, and the Lord emerges from a chair having sat there the whole time. Now Summerisle is a very strange figure, and every time I've watched the film I've become more and more convinced he's a con man. I feel like a lot of cult leaders, he's set up a system where he benefits the most and lives a lavish lifestyle while he has access to women. Even though they live in the Scottish Isles, he still talks with either a forced or disconnected English accent, clearly playing into the idea that he came in and subjugated them. This is made even more apparent in the novelization, which is not to be confused with the book that the movie was based on, The Ritual. YouTuber The Vile Eye has done a fantastic breakdown though called Analyzing Evil about Lord Summerisle that goes way more in depth than what I have time to here. So definitely go check that out. I will touch upon the major points because I think they're important, but it all kind of builds out from this scene. Now, Summerisle kind of touches upon the history of the island and how they were hit with famine and starvation. The fruits dried up and thus they turned to fish and meat. Every Sunday, the Christian islanders would bow their head and pray to their god for nourishment, but all they were met with was one of two fates. The priest said they would either die and go to heaven, or they would have to leave and join the colonies. Things changed though when Summerisle bought the island in the 1860s. He was a distinguished Victorian scientist, and he's who Summerisle shows us a picture of in his home. The picture paints him out as being like a religious figure. Beside him is an apple along with a bare tree, highlighting the miracles that he brought forth. Now, due to his knowledge of science, he was able to utilise the volcanic soil and the warm Gulf Stream that surrounded the island. This, along with a new kind of fertiliser produced at the time, allowed him to create different strains of agriculture. As we see in the film, even palm trees survive on the land, and it highlights his knowledge of nature. As we touched upon earlier, because of his experiments, he was able to induce new strains of apples, which he developed and then sold to the mainland. So all seems great, right? Well, it was, and then he presented it to the local clergy and was met with fierce opposition. They said that if God wanted them to have these fruits, then he would have provided it himself. Thus, Summerisle had to find a way to get rid of them. He basically used his power to supplant the religion and convince the locals it was the old gods who'd come to his aid. With them already being based around fertility and agriculture, it was an easy way to get the locals to change sides. The church tried to sway them and convince them their way was right, but we didn't have stuff like food packages coming over Amazon back then, and if you weren't getting food, you were probably annoyed. You know, if you're starving and you've got some Christopher Lee looking dude with plenty of fruit, then it's just way more tempting. Plus, Christianity was preaching standing against temptation, whereas the pagans allowed you to give in to your vices. So free love, free food, free thumbs up, this all swayed the islanders back.
I'll make that deal. How about you, Udovich? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
The church was pushed off the land and he became like a religious figure, and beyond that he also provided. But deep down, he and well, his descendants clearly knew it was all a ruse. In the book, Summerisle's even asked whether the Lord believed in all this mumbo-jumbo. He replies no and says that he believed in science. So in the book, Summerisle is aware well that this entire thing's a sham, and he murders Howie to keep the islanders on his side. I think deep down he believes he can buy more time and that the following harvest may end up okay. I also think he doesn't want to give up on what he's got, and here he's basically got an island that worships him. He lives in a massive estate, has constant access to girls, and is allowed to do what he wants. So he's a very sinister character, and how he pays the price for underestimating him. Now, I have seen lots of arguments about the positives of the island as well, as there's no crime, everyone's provided for, and so far everything's been good. But I think if they've all been roped into this cult that's willing to commit murder, not good at all. The Lord even mocks Christianity as well when Howie asks why the girls are dancing naked round the fire. To Summerisle, it's a divinity lesson about fertility without intercourse, which Howie scoffs at. But the Lord replies,
Himself the son of a virgin, impregnated, I believe, by a ghost.
Who are you?
I'm a ghost!
Oh.
I was raised Protestant and went to church for probably like 15 years when I was growing up, and then I got confirmed around the age of 13. That meant taking Holy Communion, which involved eating the bread, which was said to be the body of Christ. Now, to some people, I didn't think this at the time, but to some people, they've criticised it and said that that's cannibalism. But yeah, in the church, it was just what you did. The girls believe that if they jump over the flames, then the god of fire may impregnate them. This also plays in the idea that rebirth of the crops will come from them burning Howie and the Wickerman. Now, I don't know if the directors were really picking a side altogether, but I think they were more just pointing out how all beliefs require a leap in logic. The Lord is kind of above it all as well, as he's the man behind the curtain and knows fine well how the manipulation works. So when Howie's criticising his religion, he's basically saying, well, You believe this thing, and I don't think the Lord believes either of them either way. Now he grants Howie's request to exhume Rowan's body, but it just leads to more mysteries. Having taken all day, Howie returns to the manor where he finds Rose and Summerisle singing. You might notice the hair on the goblet, and if you look closely, there's a hand reaching out from it. It's a bit difficult to catch, but this is attached to an arm that's reaching around into a person and playing into this idea of transmutation. Howie's extremely frustrated when they say the hair is Rowan, but the pair just play dumb and ask what he thinks could have happened. Howie then breaks into the photographers where he develops the missing photo of Rowan. This also includes some of the living grave burials and foreshadows the living sacrifice that Howie will be forced into. It's through this photo that he also discovers the crops have failed. Realizing Rowan's not dead, we see as he returns to the Green Man to be tempted by Willow. And it's another banger. Always absolutely kills me how he's holding back as well and proper struggling to not go in there and lose a V-card. Oh, Brackland. Oh shit. Hang in there, mate. Oh. Now there are theories that if Howie had have given in here, then he wouldn't have been used in the sacrifice. The victim was required to be a virgin, and thus he wouldn't have been a suitable offering. By giving in here, he would have also given in to sexual temptation, and thus not have stuck to his strict beliefs. It's even thought that this may have been an offering by the islanders as a way out. I've seen people saying they would have gone ahead anyway, but I feel like this was almost a test to check if he was the one the prophecy said. And you passed with flying colours, mate. But not me, I'm getting up. The next day, we then see his kids carry a baby wrapped up in white cloths, much like how Howie will be at the end. We also see him poring over a book about the Mayday. Here it talks about the 3 figures needed for the ritual. There's a man hobby horse, who we see later on, as well as a man-woman, which Summerisle embodies. There's also the fool, which is something that Howie dresses up as, having been made a fool by the islanders.
Play the fool, that's what you're here for!
It also talks about the swords made to create a pagan symbol, which we later see the islanders doing. Howie then reads about the sacrifice and wrongly assumes that it's Rowan. Having made up his mind about what's going on, Howie decides to return to his plane. But no, it doesn't go well, mate, and we see as he fails to start it as the islanders watch on, in very, very creepy animal masks, and I don't know why I said, but no!
Whatever you say. Love.
Anyway, he returns to the land and spots the hobby horse and chases after him, believing it will lead him to Rowan. It's a great scene in which you kind of get pulled into the madness, and Howie overhears their plan to go to the beach for a sacrifice. But at no point does he suspect they're talking about him. Searching through the houses, he comes across several things that represent aspects of the story. Further playing into the idea that he's a fool to be mocked, he discovers a clown in a box. This also appears like a coffin, highlighting how the character's headed towards death. He then comes across a naked woman seductively lying in a really small bathtub. She bites her thumb in a seductive way and is very similar to Willow. Next, a seemingly dead girl falls out of a closet. However, she comes alive and reveals it's all just a prank, bro. This represents Rowan though, and how she's pretended to be dead only to come back alive to trick Howie at the end. Howie even searches a ship full of empty Summerisle apple boxes, but ultimately he runs into constant dead ends. Speaking of dead ends, he then comes across a woman in a coffin with coins over her eyes. That's obviously tied into what happens in a lot of burials, with there being a number of reasons for it. Some see it as a way to pay passage to the ferryman to take people to the afterlife, whereas sometimes it's as simple as it just holding the eyelids down on the corpse so they don't spring open during the funeral and freak everyone out. However, you might also notice that she's got a missing hand, and this is the hand of glory used by Willow in the next scene, which puts Howie to sleep.
I know, but with a hand of glory, there's no telling when you wake.
He then catches her dad putting on the fool costume, and after smashing him like the like button, Agent 47's it. Joining the march as the picture predicted, he's berated by Summerisle and then poked by the women who he's talked down to. They clearly all know that it's Howie underneath the mask and are just messing him around and making him look like the fool. The kids then do the head chop, leading to Howie having to put his head in the guillotine. He survives, and the death tis but a fake out, with it cutting the mask instead of the girl. Now this mask that it cuts through is a hare, and Rowan is said to be a hare. You think she's going to be killed in the sacrifice, but no, it's all just a trick. She's rolling on the floor laughing, that girl. And Howie, mate, they're giving you lots of clues here. To be fair, you need to get the hell away from it. They then decide to go to the beach. Beach, let's go get away.
They say what they gonna say. Have a drink, clink, found a Bud Light. Bad bitch like me, it's hard to come by.
And here Howie spots Rowan tied up. She kind of plays with him throughout, and the pair race through the caves, which takes him to exactly where they want him to be.
Did I do it right?
You did it beautifully!
As they congratulate Rowan, it's almost like the end of a play, with her collecting praise from the rest of the cast. Ultimately, Howie has no escape, and he looks out onto the rocks below.
Welcome, fool. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place.
The game is over, and Summerisle acts like the hand of God who's manipulated him this entire time and predicted his every thought and move. It plays in the idea of fate and clearly makes Summerisle look like he's more than a man. Now he touches upon how animals and children may be acceptable sacrifices to the gods, but a virgin adult Christian is something that they love. They've researched him and picked the perfect person to play into their games. Completely outnumbering him, they restrain him and tell him he'll go through a stage of death and rebirth. But it won't be a resurrection like Jesus, and instead he'll be reborn in their crops. Howie says they can dress it up how they like, but it will just be murder.
Your crops failed because your strains failed.
Why would you say something so controversial?
He begs Summerisle to tell them the truth and says that if the crops fail next year, then they're gonna come for him next. You can see the shock on his face as the finally penny drops, but this whole statement is basically about how he ignored God and became a false prophet, and thus God destroyed their crops and will come for him next. Although Summerisle does look a bit shook, he defiantly says that they will not fail as he knows they will not. It's true belief, and rather than just saying I think, that I know is just an act of defiance. Knowing, belief, faith, all that stuff, it's all perfectly brought across in the performance here, and just the choice of the word no cements how much he believes his own hype. How he's then led to the top, and we get one of the most iconic lines in the film.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
How he's screaming, oh God! Oh Jesus Christ! Upon saying it was also kind of a real reaction. On set, Woodward was repeatedly invited up to see the Wickerman, but he always declined the invite. This was because he wanted to see the structure for the first time as Howie was brought before it. And that shock, that realization, it definitely leaps off screen. Led to the mound like Jesus was to the crucifix, they give the character a Christian saint's death. Ultimately, we see a baptism of fire where violence and the pagan ideology overcomes Christianity. It plays into the failure of a rational and moral authority against blind collective belief. Howie is stuffed into the Wickerman along with lots of animals which were thought to add to the sacrifice. Howie's reaction here as he cries out for Christ has stuck with me forever, and ultimately his pleas fall on deaf ears. Stuffed into this gigantic tomb, he's burned alive and ignored by his deity. The Now Playing podcast also pointed out that using a Wickerman like this could be symbolic of how he's a straw man and his hollow ideas aren't going to save him. Plays into a grim reality in which our cries are often ignored and the bad guys tend to win more times than they lose. We see an entire community complicit in the sacrifice and watch as they sing and celebrate the murder of this man. According to IMDb Trivia, this is the 13th century song The Reverie, which is a song that celebrates the return of summer. Meanwhile, Howie's final speech is based upon Sir Walter Raleigh's dying words. Ultimately, Howie's hymn is drowned out by the masses, and he dies horrifically in this burning effigy. The animals squeal, it all sounds agonizing, and all in all, absolutely terrifying. Just the way the crowd swing their arms around and cheer is so chilling, and it's an image that's stuck with me forever, especially the gardener doing it. As Howie burns alive, we then see the sun set, symbolically putting an end to this story. Now, this could symbolize that the sun god will bless them and the sacrifice has worked. However, there's also the possibility that Howie died for nothing, and I actually have a pretty depressing read on the whole thing. Now, the creators were clearly very anti-religion and deliberately criticized both sides in the film. Howie really isn't a likable protagonist, and he's a prude that I think when watching this, he's not that endearing. On the flip side of this, the islanders are just very, very creepy. So I even think there's the read that Howie doesn't go to heaven and the pagans also don't get the harvest. If you look at the fact this film refuses to pick a side, you could also see it as the creators saying we should stop this whole religion thing together. The UK and the thing that united these kingdoms that we live in today is because religion was brought in and forced throughout the land. These pagans were subjugated, their culture was taken away, and I think you can look at it like, who's the real baddies here?
Are we the baddies?
That's me reading into it and interpreting it from what the creators have said. But yeah, looking around the 70s, people did start to question whether religion was doing more harm than good. These days, that 90% Christianity level has dropped to 46, and church attendance is of course a lot lower. So it does feel like they were kind of tapping into that, and whether right or wrong, I think the movie does it in a really subtle way that, yeah, I think you could completely disagree with how I read it, because yeah, it's not on the nose, but I did kind of read that when watching this film this time. Now, did the sacrifice work? Well, we can make an educated guess due to the Wicker tree. Released almost 40 years later in 2011, we see an elderly Summerisle in the film. So that explains the crops presumably did come back, but I personally tend to prefer how this just left it ambiguous. The real horror comes in not knowing whether this has even worked, and you could even take the sunset as showing that the crops failed. Sunsets of course symbolise the end, and it might hint that everyone lost here. The sun is set not only on Howie but also this community, and they've damned not only Howie but also themselves in carrying out this murder. Now there were even talks that they were going to have the rain come down and put out the fire, and this would signify that God had indeed saved the character. But I think giving this movie a happy ending is the wrong way to go, and I think this is the perfect way to close it out. And yeah, what a way to end the movie. I really think it's one of those classics that was a true labour of love, and it's a miracle that we still have it in the condition that we do. Lee even paid for the press tour out of his own salary and hit up every radio station that would have him to talk about the film. This included ones across the US, and he would often say this was his bestest role ever. It's of course had a massive enduring legacy, and even today, I think it's one of the best horrors ever. Every single cult movie you see, they owe a lot to the Wickerman, a hell of a lot to the Wickerman, and yeah, it's been a blast just going back through this, and yeah, thank you for watching. Also, I just want to apologise as well for taking so long to get to this movie, and I actually went back on Slack and looked at when we started the thread, and it had me opening it on the 11th of January 2024. So 2 years, mate.
And you're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
Haven't spent all that time making the script, obviously, but constant copyright strikes whenever we covered things by that studio, being told we had to buy expensive licenses just to review it, and even lawyers emailing me saying that would be in trouble for making as in-depth a video as we normally do. That all just stressed me out, and I just thought, we're not doing it. We were basically told that if this video was longer than 5 minutes, then it wouldn't be fair use, but I'd struggled to really analyse this film like that in such a short space of time. Having that hanging over my head just made me think that there's going to be other films that will cause less bother and probably get more views than this. So it all made this something that I kept putting back. And I'm so sorry, because I even had comments from people saying that they joined our membership back then because I said I was tackling the film. But look, one day I just woke up and I thought, even if we get a copyright strike, we're just going to fight it, just going to push through, and if the lawyers hit us up again, we'll go from there. But yeah, I just hope someone in the copyright office or whatever who puts the claim in realizes how much these reviews actually push people to go back and watch these films, and that we probably reignite some interest in them, even if it's small. And go pick up the 4K Blu-ray because it is fantastic. But yeah, that's why it's taken so long, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please drop a like on the video as well, and drop a comment with all your thoughts on the film. If you want to follow us on Instagram as well and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this each and every week? If you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else, and it costs just 99 cents a month or less than $12 a year. All goes towards these big in-depth breakdowns, and huge thank you to everyone who's done that. Really means a lot to us. We also have our merch store as well, the shirts you can see behind me. I worry that I'm promoting too much stuff, but yeah, that's there if you want, and we've got discounts on them too. Now, if you want something else to watch, we've got a big breakdown of The Shining on screen right now, so hopefully I'll see you over there after this. If not, thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.